When I was listening to your testimony, I noticed that you kind of had some conflicting information straight from your parents growing up, because you had a mom that was Catholic and a dad who was an atheist, right?
Right.
So what was that like for you as a child or a teenager growing up with like conflicting views on the Lord and faith and a belief system?
We went to Catholic school and went to church every Sunday. I was an altar boy and kind of went through all that stuff. I was baptized and went through first communions and things like that. So I really didn't get involved in asking my dad about things about his faith. I'd ask him why he didn't go to church with us on Sunday, but I didn't get a ton of tutelage on why he was atheist, or I just knew that he was. High school, college kind of time frame where I started pushing a little further and asking more probing questions with it. And I actually had a college religious class where I had to interview both of them. And that's where I started really getting into the paradox and questioning more of my own personal faith in Catholicism. And I interviewed both my parents. And that's where I made a decision actually to go atheist.
Right. Okay. It's so interesting because you did the investigation, you looked at the paradox, and at first you landed with, this God thing can't be real, it can't be true. And so when you did that investigation and you interviewed mom and you interviewed dad and you started investigating for yourself, where are the areas that you struggled and went, this isn't a paradox that proves true, this is something that for me is a conflict I can't resolve, and I don't think this is true about the Lord? Like, where were the doubts?
Yeah, so there was a lot of things that were doubts that why do bad things happen? We lost my brother when I was 11 years old.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
With a car accident, so that was quite tragic. Why would the Lord take, my brother from me? Would that be why, we were living a good life, he was a good kid, things like that. So if it was a good and righteous and caring Lord, why would he allow such bad things to happen? And then there was some hypocrisy that I saw from the church and the Catholic Church about rules and legalism that they would lay down on you, yet quite sinful priests that were around and doing things that they shouldn't be doing. Evolution, the age of the earth, non-caring God potentially, and things like that. And that's where, my decision came in at that time to be an atheist.
At what point, though, did things start to kind of shift back for you, where instead of doubting like Catholicism and the existence of God, now you start doubting atheism or being agnostic, or that maybe there is something else out there?
I started studying the historical man of Jesus. And at the time, certainly not God, and not God's Son, and not part of the Holy Trinity, but just the guy that may or may not have walked around on the earth 2,000 years ago. Who was he? What did he do? What do the historians say about who he was? And people from outside of Christianity, the people that murdered him and killed him, the people that wanted him dead and his legacy squashed, all had a certain tie of historical prevalence or consistency that said who Jesus was. And that's where kind of like I got intrigued and go, I want to learn more about that.
That's so cool. So you found what was tangible and
Right.
explored that. And then from there, that helped you kind of
Right.
take the leap of faith. What for you was the tipping point to get you from Jesus the man in the flesh that just lived as a human being to Jesus is God's Son that can provide me salvation?
So it's got to be faith, because there isn't enough proof.
Right.
But the tipping point for me was based on enough facts around who Jesus was and what he did that it didn't make sense for him to be a normal man. Jesus lived his life with no possessions. Jesus at the time had some of the most powerful influence of anyone around that time. And with all that influence, he's the only person I've ever studied in history that took that power and influence and used it for zero personal gain.
Right.
And anyone around him, he didn't want them using it for personal gain. And his teachings were to have no personal gain at it and to live for the Lord and dedicate your life for the Lord. If that was a trick, if that was something that was, I don't know, like a magic trick, why would you do that? Mm-hmm. Like there was that logic point where you just go, okay, maybe it's all a fictitious story, or this person was just a great con man and he was really influential, but then why wouldn't he take something from it?
Right.
And then if he died, why would his followers continue to be abused And why wouldn't they try and take from it? And no one did. So he left such an impactful mark on everyone's life that he was around, that they were willing to die for him, and still no gain. There's no upside to it for them. If everything has to conform to what we see here in life, this guy doesn't exist, right? There's no way he's just a human.
That's totally what we're discussing today. We're discussing the paradox of Jesus giving up his godliness, becoming man, dying for his creation, who has chosen to sin and run from a relationship with him. Like, not even just like willingly accept his love, but sometimes we just run the other way, and build up all this like baggage and hurt against him. And so just that paradox that he would do that, it just seems absurd, you know, but like you said, you investigate it and go, why? And it doesn't make any sense other than the biblical like truth that we see of who God is, how much he cares for us, and that relationship he wants with his creation. As a father to teenagers, if they came to you and expressed doubts, if they were struggling with their faith or their own belief system, what would you say to help them work through their doubts, or what would you encourage them with?
My kids have had doubts. And I encourage my kids to have doubts, and to express their doubts and talk about these paradoxes at home. And my son, before he was baptized, goes, I don't know, Dad. It seems too big that God created all of this, that there's one person up there and that there's this. And so I encourage them to express their doubts, but he expressed doubts with me. And
yeah, that's so great. I think the enemy he always tries to isolate, right? And so when we're doubting, a lot of times we tend to run from the church, especially if we're already in the church and we're doubting, you know, we hide those. We feel like it's something wrong. It's actually a healthy thing. It strengthens our faith when we try to understand it. So you would basically just say, explore it, do your homework.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if it isn't your doubt, even if you were to sit back and just think about what are all the doubts that could be, it helps you to be a better witness to Christ. So when somebody comes up and goes, well, how do you explain this? You might have always taken it on blind faith, but if you go explore that, now you have a great witness to Jesus, to friends of yours that may not know Christ.